Hey everyone. Tonight we begin not with a gunshot or an explosion, but with a man biting into his own boot. The broth in his tin cup smells of leather and smoke. Once, he marched on full stomachs and victory speeches. Now, he boils belts and chews candle wax just to stay alive. This isn't a nightmare, it's Stalingrad, winter of 1942. 3 million soldiers crossed into Russia with bread, chocolate, and confidence. But the farther they marched, the thinner their rations became, until sawdust became bread, and hunger became command. What started as discipline turned into delirium. Men traded bullets for scraps of horse meat, burned maps to warm soup that had no meat left. When food ran out, humanity did too. If you want to know how an army collapsed from the inside out, stay with me. Because tonight, we taste the hunger that devoured the Eastern Front. Imagine, if you will, the summer of 1941. The air is still, thick with the scent of pine and rich earth. A warmth that promises bounty. You stand on the edge of a vast emerald land. The Soviet Union stretching out before you like an endless canvas. You are part of an army. The Wehrmacht. A name whispered with awe and certainty. As you prepare to cross the border, a quiet confidence settles in your chest. A feeling of destiny. The goal is clear. The path, seemingly paved with victory, will celebrate Christmas in Moscow. The whispers travel down the ranks, carried on the soft summer breeze. The initial days are a testament to meticulous planning and abundant resources. You remember the roar of the field kitchens, those mobile heartbeats of the army, churning with smoke and the rhythmic clatter of iron. The air around them is always warm, fragrant with the promise of a hot meal. You recall the robust laughter of your comrades, a sound that echoes with youthful vitality. As you gather around steaming bowls of rich pea soup, the deep, earthy aroma fills your nostrils, a comforting anchor in the vast, unfamiliar landscape. Each spoonful is a taste of home, of order, of a system that works precisely and reliably. Alongside the soup, thick slices of dark rye bread, heavy and satisfying, are passed around. You feel its texture in your hand, its slight resistance as you tear off a piece, the wholesome taste as it melts on your tongue. Your standard ration is generous, a solid foundation for the strenuous days of marching about 1 pound of bread, a little less than 5 ounces of meat, and a substantial 3.3 pounds of potatoes. There's always bitter tea or coffee to wash it down, warming you from the inside out, preparing you for the long marches. And then there's the distinct red tin of Coca-Cola, a marvel of engineering and energy. You remember the smooth, dark chocolate, laced with caffeine, a powerful stimulant. You and your comrades would joke about it, how it could keep a man awake for 3 nights straight. A seemingly endless wellspring of focus and drive. It's more than just a treat. It's a tool, a symbol of your army's advanced capabilities, its foresight, its... Every meal then feels like a quiet, unspoken promise. It's a reaffirmation whispered through the steam rising from your tin cup. A gentle reassurance carried on the scent of roasting meat and brewing coffee. The system works. Keep going. You are cared for. You are strong. You trust in this promise. You trust in the strength of your army, in the genius of its logistics. As you march deeper into the heart of Russia, the landscape slowly begins to shift. The summer warmth giving way to the subtle chill of autumn. Yet, The field kitchens continue their steady roar. The bread remains plentiful. The coffee still warms your hands. The confidence in your victory is as tangible as the weight of your rifle, as comforting as the steam from your dinner. But then, as the days shorten and the first harsh winds begin to whisper of winter, that intricate system, so robust and reliable, starts to show the faintest, almost imperceptible cracks. You feel a subtle shift, a change in the air, a faint tremor beneath the surface of your unwavering belief. As the golden hues of autumn faded into the stark grays of early winter, a different kind of shadow began to stretch across the land. It wasn't just the lengthening nights. It was the chilling realization of distance. You had marched hundreds, then thousands of miles, deeper and deeper into a country that seemed to conspire against your very presence. The supply lines, those vital arteries feeding the colossal war machine, became impossibly elongated. Thin threads stretching back to a distant, increasingly irrelevant home. You started to notice the strain, the subtle signs of a system pushed to its limits. The roads, once passable, became quagmires of mud, then iron-hard frozen ruts, treacherous and unforgiving. The vastness of the land, which had once felt like a grand stage for your triumph, now felt like a hungry maw, swallowing resources, absorbing men and materiel into its indifferent expanse. You hear the distant, muffled thuds of Soviet demolitions bridges collapsing, railroad tracks twisted into grotesque sculptures of metal. Each explosion, each severed connection, felt like a deliberate blow, not just to a rail line, but to the very foundation of your existence. The rhythm of supply, once so predictable, began to falter, stuttering like a dying heart. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the generous portions of your early days began to dwindle. The calorie count, once a robust 300 per day, a testament to your army's provision, now shrank. First to 2,500, then to a stark 2,000 calories. You notice the change not just in the size of your plate, but in your body. It's enough, perhaps, to keep marching, to put one foot in front of the other through the biting cold and swirling snow. But it is not enough to truly win. It's not enough to feel the surge of energy, the boundless reserves that had fueled your early confidence. You feel the constant gnawing at the edges of your stomach, a dull ache that never quite dissipates. The field kitchen, once a bastion of order and plenty, becomes a place of quiet improvisation. You watch and soon participate, as soldiers begin to mix everything they can find into the thinning stews, whatever oats can be salvaged. Withered cabbage, frozen turnips. The goal is no longer taste, but volume. To stretch every meager meal, to fill the gaping void in your belly, even if only with fibrous bulk. The hearty goulash you once enjoyed, rich with meat and spices, slowly transforms. The meat disappears first, then the sugar, then, most subtly and disturbingly, the flavor itself. What remains is a pale, watery broth, thick not with ingredients, but with the pervasive smell of smoke and the collective exhaustion of the men around you. Meals stop being moments of pleasure, or even simple sustenance. They become something else entirely, a grim ritual, a delay from the inevitable. Each mouthful is a small victory against the growing emptiness, a temporary truce with the hunger that has begun its relentless siege. The laughter around the campfires fades, replaced by a quiet, determined chewing, a focused effort to extract every last crumb of energy from the meager offerings. You feel the cold seep deeper into your bones, the weariness settling into your muscles, and a new, unwelcome companion begins to march alongside you, the constant, gnawing presence of hunger. It's a silent enemy, relentless and insidious, and you sense that its grip is only tightening as the merciless winter descends. As winter deepened its icy grip, a new word entered the soldier's lexicon, spoken with a mixture of dark humor and grim resignation. Ersatz. It means substitute. But to you, it became the gospel of survival, a whispered prayer for anything that could postpone the inevitable. The days when food nourished both body and spirit felt like a distant, fading memory. Now, food was a puzzle, a clever deception designed to trick the stomach, if not the mind. The most fundamental of all foods, bread, underwent a shocking transformation. You remember the feeling of that heavy, dark rye, its honest weight in your hand. But now, the bread that arrived at the front lines was something else entirely. It was stretched, thinned, adulterated with whatever could be found. Potato flour made it slightly gummy. Cellulose turned it oddly fibrous. And sometimes, you could even detect the faint, woody scent of sawdust mixed into the dough. You hold a slice in your hand, its color a sickly gray-brown, its texture oddly crumbly, yet dense. You chew it slowly, trying to convince your body that this, too, is nourishment. But the taste is flat, almost metallic, devoid of the wholesome richness you remember. It fills your stomach. Yes, but leaves a hollow ache, a yearning for the real thing. The morning coffee, once a bitter but bracing start to the day, was now a brew made from roasted barley. You raise the steaming cup to your lips, hoping for the familiar comfort, but the aroma is different. Earthy, yes, but lacking the stimulating depth of coffee. The taste is thin, watery, with a faint, toasted bitterness that offers no real warmth or wakefulness. And sugar, that precious, energy-giving sweetness, a luxury of a bygone era, was replaced by tiny, metallic sweetener tablets. You drop one into your ersatz coffee, watching it dissolve, but the resulting sweetness is artificial, cloying, lacking the natural comfort of real sugar. It's a chemical trick, a shadow of flavor. Then there were the sausages. You remember the hearty, spiced sausages of early summer, glistening with fat. Now, even those were subjected to the gospel of ersatz. You are told that blood, salvaged from whatever animals could be found, or even from the desperate improvisations of the slaughterhouses, was blended into the meat to extend it. The resulting sausage was dark, almost black, with a glossy, unsettling sheen. You cut into it, and the iron-heavy smell of blood, raw and primal, fills your nostrils. You eat it, because you must, because it offers a fleeting illusion of protein. But the taste is stark, unforgettable, and profoundly unsettling. You and your comrades try to joke about it. Of course. Wood bread, you'd murmur, a dry, humorless chuckle escaping your lips as you pass around the grim rations. But the cramps that soon gripped your stomach, the persistent dizziness that made the world spin at the slightest movement, the constant, dull ache behind your eyes. These were not funny. These were real. Physical manifestations of your body crying out for proper nutrition. You were no longer eating for pleasure or even for robust strength. You were simply eating for survival, and in those moments, as you chewed the strange, unyielding textures of your ersatz meals, you realized a profound and sorrowful truth. We were eating memory, not food. You were consuming the ghost of what food once was, a pale imitation that kept your body moving, but slowly, relentlessly, hollowed out your spirit. The field kitchens, once the vibrant, roaring heartbeats of the advancing army, now stood like silent monuments to a fading dream. You remember the billowing smoke that marked their presence on the horizon, a beacon of warmth and sustenance. Now, that comforting plume was gone, replaced by a stillness, an eerie silence that spoke volumes of the desolation that had settled over the Eastern Front. The iron stoves, once glowing fiercely, were cold, their surfaces coated in a thin layer of frost, reflecting the pale, weak light of the winter sun. The fuel had simply vanished. The logistical chains, already strained to their breaking point, could no longer deliver the massive quantities of coal or wood needed to feed these hungry iron beasts. You watch as men, once proud and disciplined, scrabble desperately in the frozen landscape, searching for anything that might burn. Ammunition crates, once treated with reverence, are now ruthlessly broken apart, their splintered wood offered as a desperate sacrifice to the cold. You gather around these meager fires, the acrid smoke stinging your eyes, just to boil water, to bring a fleeting illusion of warmth to your cupped hands. The simple act of boiling water becomes a sacred ritual, a brief defiance against the encroaching cold. The pea soup, once thick and hearty, a meal in itself, has become a ghost of its former self. You dip your spoon into the gray liquid, searching for any solid fragment, any sign of the peas or the promised meat. There is none. It is thin, watery, with a faint, almost imperceptible whisper of flavor, a memory more than a taste. It's barely sustenance. Yet you drink it slowly, savoring the momentary warmth that spreads through your chilled chest. Every drop is precious, a tiny battle won against the gnawing emptiness. In this landscape of scarcity, every morsel becomes a treasure, every shared scrap a communion. You remember the quiet solemnity as a small piece of frozen fat, perhaps scavenged from a discarded horse carcass, is divided among a handful of men. It's not a feast. It's a profound gesture of shared humanity, a silent acknowledgement of mutual suffering. You watch as the men carefully separate the meager portion, their fingers stiff with cold, their eyes holding a desperate intensity. The taste of it, when it finally reaches your tongue, is rich and fleeting, a potent burst of energy that vanishes too quickly. Each sip of warm, thin broth, each bite of that inadequate soup, feels like a prayer. It's a silent plea for endurance, a whispered hope for another sunrise. For a few precious moments, the illusion of life returns, a flicker of warmth in the vast, consuming cold. You close your eyes, trying to conjure the image of a roaring hearth, a warm home, a full stomach. But the illusion is fragile, fleeting. When the last tendril of smoke from the field kitchens finally fades, dissolving into the vast, indifferent sky, an even deeper silence descends. It is the silence of hunger, a profound quiet that settles not just over the landscape, but within your very being, a vast, echoing emptiness that begins to consume everything. The calendar turns to November 1942, and the very name of the city, Stalingrad, begins to echo with a chilling finality. You are here, caught in its icy embrace, a fortress of rubble and snow, where the world outside seems to have forgotten you. The rumors, once just whispers, harden into a terrifying truth. The Sixth Army, your army, is encircled. The hope of escape, of relief, slowly withers under the relentless Soviet assault and the merciless grip of winter. You feel the walls closing in, not just the physical walls of the city, but the invisible, suffocating walls of despair. The bread, once the cornerstone of your daily ration, is now a cruel mockery of its former self. From a substantial 1 pound, it is slashed to a mere 2 ounces, barely 2 thin slices. A paltry 150 calories. You hold these fragments in your gloved hand, turning them over, trying to make them last, to make them fill a void that only grows larger with each passing hour. This isn't food. It's a gesture, a symbolic offering against the tide of starvation. You feel the cold seep into your fingers, the weakness in your limbs, a constant reminder of how little true sustenance you receive. Desperation breeds a brutal ingenuity. You watch as men, once discerning soldiers, now turn to anything that might stave off the hunger. Horse meat, once a last resort, becomes a prized commodity. You see it eaten raw, sometimes frozen solid, hacked off carcasses with bayonets, its bloody iron taste a shock to your system. Yet a temporary reprieve for your famished body. Chewing frozen fat, a greasy, unyielding substance, becomes a grim task, your teeth aching with the effort, but your body craving the calories it reluctantly provides. And then, the unspeakable. Candle wax, scraped from a flickering wick, chewed slowly, its waxy texture offering no nutrition, but a momentary illusion of something in your mouth. You witness it, and soon, you participate. The line between man and animal blurring with each desperate act. Boot soup is no longer a dark joke. It's a horrifying reality. You watch as leather belts, harness straps, even pieces of saddle, are boiled in helmets and tin cups. The leathery smell fills the air. Mingling with the scent of smoke and despair, the boiling process breaks down the fibers, creating a gelatinous, unappetizing jelly. You force yourself to swallow it. The strange, chewy texture and metallic taste doing little to satisfy, but offering a fleeting sense of having consumed something. It's a bitter, indigestible reminder of your desperate plight. The physical toll is stark, relentless. You feel your own body wasting away, a constant drain on your energy. In just 10 weeks, you or your comrades lose an average of 20 pounds, sometimes more. Your uniforms, once tailored, now hang loose, flapping around your emaciated frame. Your cheekbones become sharp, your eyes sunken, the fire in them replaced by a hollow, desperate gleam. Survival, once a fierce determination, twists into a cruel, macabre joke played out between the biting frost and the growing piles of corpses. Each new day brings not relief, but a deeper plunge into the abyss, as the city and your own body slowly freeze and starve. You are not just fighting the Soviets, you are fighting your own biology, a losing battle against the emptiness within. Beyond the immediate confines of Stalingrad, in the desolate expanses near places like Gumrak, the true depth of human suffering unfurls in a way that transcends the ordinary horrors of war. Here, in the prison camps, thousands upon thousands of Soviet prisoners of war are left to the elements, starving, freezing in the relentless snow. You hear the stories, whispered in hushed tones, of a place where humanity itself becomes a fragile, fleeting concept. With no clean water, they are driven to scoop up dirty snow, pressing it to cracked lips, the impurities a minor concern compared to the agony of thirst. When the meager piles of firewood dwindle, and the last splinters are consumed by desperate flames, they turn to the clothes of the dead, stripping the fallen. They burn their uniforms, their boots, anything that can offer a few precious moments of warmth against the bone-chilling cold. And then, the unspeakable, the ultimate taboo. When the dead are gone, when their clothes have turned to ash, the living turn to the dead themselves. You avert your eyes, but the knowledge permeates the air. A heavy, suffocating blanket of absolute despair. This is not war as you knew it. This is the complete unraveling of civilization. A descent into a primal state where instinct overrules all moral constraint. It is a quiet horror, enacted in the vast, indifferent landscape. A terrible testament to the limits of human endurance and the depths of human degradation when survival becomes the only law. The chilling truth is that this same descent, this same breaking of the final boundary, begins to unfold within the German lines inside Stalingrad. The horse meat, once a grim necessity, quickly vanishes. The rats, if they can be caught, become a fleeting delicacy. And then, as the last vestiges of conventional sustenance disappear, the unthinkable becomes a grim reality. You see the haunted eyes, the gaunt faces, the silent desperation. The whispered stories from the POW camps now echo in your own lines. It's not a monstrous act born of malice, but of absolute, consuming desperation. Food now means anything. Anything at all that can make your heart beat just one more time. That can fuel another ragged breath. Another step through the frozen rubble. You don't wish to look too closely, to understand too deeply, for fear of what you might find reflected in your own soul. The concept of self, of identity, of moral compass, slowly dissolves under the relentless pressure of starvation. The whispers you hear, the looks you sometimes catch, confirm the terrifying truth. It is a silent agreement, an unspoken pact with desperation. This is the point of no return, where the very essence of what it means to be human is stripped away, leaving only the raw, biological imperative to survive. The chilling truth of it settles in your bones. Starvation doesn't make monsters, it reveals them. It doesn't transform good men into evil creatures, but rather peels back the layers of societal conditioning, of moral upbringing, to expose the primal, unvarnished animal beneath. It reveals the terrifying fragility of human ethics when confronted with absolute, crushing need. And in the bleak landscape of Stalingrad, as the wind howls and the snow falls, you realize that you, too, are treading perilously close to that thin, razor-sharp edge, where the difference between humanity and its shadow is measured in ounces of desperate flesh. The systemic collapse was not a sudden explosion, but a slow, insidious dissolution, like ice melting under a weak sun. You feel it profoundly within your own body, a relentless decay. The Sixth Army's diet, once at a barely sufficient 500 calories, plummeted further, plunging to a terrifying 500 calories per day. This isn't sustenance, it's merely a prolonged dying. You learn to recognize the signs, not just in others, but in the growing hollowness within yourself. Your muscles, once strong and capable, begin to dissolve, to waste away. You feel them softening, shrinking, unable to bear the weight they once effortlessly supported. The bones beneath your skin become prominent, sharp angles where flesh once rounded. Every movement is an effort, a profound struggle against a body that is consuming itself. Your mind, once sharp and focused, begins to blur, thoughts slowing, becoming sluggish, fragmented. Simple commands are difficult to process. Memories flicker in and out, the world around you taking on a dreamlike, detached quality. You find yourself staring blankly, unable to concentrate, lost in a fog of exhaustion and hunger. The most terrifying manifestation is the sudden, unpredictable fainting spells. You witness comrades, standing upright, seemingly engaged in a task, suddenly crumple to the ground, their bodies giving out without warning. And then, one day, it happens to you. You feel a sudden dizziness. The world tilts, and a wave of blackness washes over you. When you come to, perhaps minutes later, the experience leaves you weaker, more disoriented, a stark reminder of your body's rebellion. The energy required to simply be becomes monumental. The suffering extends to all ranks. You hear the stories, whispered with a mixture of awe and pity, of General Zeitzler, far from the direct horrors of Stalingrad, attempting to share in the suffering of his men. He deliberately restricted his own rations, an act of empathy that quickly turned into a personal torment. In just 2 weeks, he lost a staggering 26 pounds. Imagine, if you can, the sheer physical and mental anguish of a man in power, deliberately inflicting this upon himself, and still realizing it was but a fraction of what his soldiers endured. It illustrated the crushing, undeniable reality of the hunger. Thousands upon thousands of your comrades die, not from a direct bullet wound, not from a shell fragment, but from the quiet, merciless mathematics of starvation. Their bodies simply give up, their organs failing, their hearts slowing to a final, permanent stop. It's a death without drama, without the heroic last stand, just a gradual fading, a silent surrender to the emptiness. You hear the desperate, crackling radio messages from General Paulus, his voice strained, a plea born of utter despair. My men are dying from starvation. The words hang in the frozen air, a stark admission of a losing battle against an invisible, yet omnipresent, foe. The enemy is no longer merely the Soviet soldier beyond the lines. It is something far more intimate. More terrifying, it is the gnawing, all-consuming emptiness inside you. It is the cold hollow that replaces your strength, your will, your very sense of self. It is a constant, suffocating presence that overshadows all other thoughts, all other fears. You become a walking vessel of hunger, your every waking moment dominated by its relentless demands. The fight has ceased to be about ideology or victory. It has become a primal, desperate struggle against your own dissolving form. The final, agonizing act of the Stalingrad siege unfolds. And with it, the shattered remnants of the Sixth Army are forced to confront the ultimate capitulation. You are among the 107,000 who surrender, a vast, spectral parade of broken men, marching not towards victory, but into the bleak unknown of captivity. The sight of you and your comrades, once proud soldiers in crisp uniforms, is now a testament to utter desolation. Your uniforms, once a symbol of order and strength, now hang loose and tattered, mere rags draped over skeletal frames. Your eyes, once alive with purpose, are sunken and hollow, reflecting nothing but the vast, empty landscape and the lingering horror within. Your hands, once steady on a rifle, now tremble uncontrollably, weakened by months of starvation. This is not a triumphant army. These are not even soldiers, in the conventional sense. They are shadows. Gaunt figures moving mechanically through the snow, stripped of all outward signs of their former identity. The very essence of their soldierly bearing has been devoured by hunger, replaced by a primal need to simply exist, to take the next breath, to put one foot in front of the other. The humanity that once defined them seems to have receded, leaving behind only the stark outlines of survival. The chilling statistics, when finally revealed, paint a devastating picture that underscores the profound impact of starvation. Of those 107,000 who surrendered, a mere 5,000 ever returned to Germany. Think of that number. A staggering 95% perish. They die not from a sudden, violent wound on the battlefield, but from the insidious, relentless damage that hunger had already wrought upon their bodies and minds. They die in the harsh Soviet camps, succumb to diseases their weakened systems cannot fight or simply fade away, their spirits extinguished by the memory of the empty pot. Their deaths are a quiet, drawn-out consequence of the internal collapse, a testament to the slow, brutal efficacy of starvation as a weapon. As the food ran out, slowly, inexorably, so too did humanity. The bonds of camaraderie, while sometimes strengthened by shared suffering, were often fractured by the raw instinct for survival. The rules of conduct, the moral codes, the very fabric of civilized behavior, eroded under the crushing weight of hunger. You see it in the haunted eyes, the furtive glances, the silent, unspoken knowledge of what men were driven to do. The tin cup, once a simple vessel for a meal, now holds a profound, unspoken story. It whispers of defeat, not just military, but spiritual. It tells the same grim tale that the tattered maps did, the maps that once charted routes to victory, but now only trace the boundaries of an inescapable trap. The journey into captivity is a blur of cold and weakness. You march, or are dragged, through endless stretches of snow, each step a monumental effort. The silence is profound, broken only by the crunch of boots on ice, the ragged breathing of the dying, and the occasional, muffled cry. You carry the emptiness within you, a ghost of what you once were, a living testament to the terrible power of hunger to dismantle not just an army, but the very soul of a man. The echoes of that silent march, the shadows of those lost comrades, will haunt the landscape and your own memories for decades to come. Even for those who miraculously survived the crucible of Stalingrad. The ordeal did not end with the ceasefire or the eventual release from captivity. The hunger, that relentless, all-consuming companion, etched itself into the very fabric of their beings, leaving an indelible mark. You learn that survivors, whether private soldiers or generals, carried the war within them, not just in their memories, but in their senses. They never truly forgot the taste of scorched, moldy bread, of rutabaga soup so thin it barely coated the spoon, or the strange, metallic tang of boiled leather. These tastes, these sensations, became a part of their very cells. For the rest of their lives, the ghost of hunger followed them. It was a subtle, insidious presence that lingered over every meal, a phantom ache in their stomachs that even the most bountiful feast could not entirely dispel. You could be sitting at a warm table, years later, with plenty of food before you, and suddenly, the memory would surface the desperate craving, the gnawing emptiness, the primal fear of scarcity, the smell of a rich stew, meant to be comforting, might instead trigger a flashback to the watery, smoke-filled broths of the front, the texture of soft, fresh bread. A simple pleasure for others could evoke the dry, sawdust-laced rations that scraped your throat. Some survivors, you observe, could never again bring themselves to touch dark rye bread, that once staple, that symbol of basic sustenance, had been so profoundly corrupted by the experience that its very presence on the table evoked a visceral revulsion. For them, it tasted not of wholesome grain, but of ash and memory, of the bitter dust of defeat and the quiet horror of starvation. It was a food that had promised life, but had become inextricably linked with death and the breaking of human spirit. You see it in their habits, too, the meticulous way they clear their plates, leaving not a single crumb, the way they hoard food, even when abundance surrounds them. A subconscious fear of the return of scarcity, the quiet gratitude they hold for even the simplest meal, a depth of appreciation that those who have never truly starved can never fully comprehend. They eat not just for sustenance, but for the profound psychological comfort that food provides, a bulwark against the re-emergence of that terrifying emptiness. From the lowest private to the highest general, the brutal lessons of the Eastern Front were etched into their souls. They learned, with a clarity that cut through all ideology and military doctrine, the fundamental truth: an army dies when its stomach does. Bullets and bombs could inflict swift, visible damage, but hunger was a slow, relentless killer, capable of dissolving morale, strength, and will long before the enemy's final charge. Death didn't always come with the roar of gunfire or the shriek of incoming shells. Often, you realize, it came quietly, insidiously, in the profound silence of an empty pot, a chilling stillness that resonated with the finality of a life extinguished by lack. The bitter aftertaste of that war was not just in their mouths, but in their very being, a permanent shadow cast over every future meal, a constant reminder of the price of an empty belly. As you reflect upon the vast, frozen landscape of the Eastern Front, a sobering truth emerges, echoing the quiet desolation of those empty pots. Starvation was the second front of the Eastern Front. It wasn't merely a consequence of the fighting. It was a strategic force, a relentless adversary that fought alongside the Soviets, often proving more devastating than any conventional weapon. Hunger killed more than bullets ever could, silently, insidiously eroding the very foundation of an army. It broke morale, shattered discipline, and extinguished the will to fight long before the physical front lines were ever breached. You contemplate the insidious nature of this second front. It was a weapon wielded by both sides, a cruel and indiscriminate force. Civilians, caught between the warring powers, starved under German requisition. Their meager harvests ceased to feed the invaders. And in a brutal, horrifying symmetry, the German soldiers themselves starved in return, swallowed by the vastness of the land they sought to conquer. and the collapsing supply lines they could not sustain. It becomes clear that no side in this horrific conflict was entirely innocent when it came to the weaponization of hunger. Not the Wehrmacht, with its ambitious plans that outstripped its logistical capabilities, leading to the deprivation of millions. Not the Soviets, who, in their desperate defense, sometimes employed scorched earth tactics that further exacerbated the suffering. And certainly not the war itself, that ravenous beast that consumed everything in its path, reducing human lives to mere calculations of calories and survival. In the end, the battlefield, stretching across thousands of miles of icy plains and ruined cities, smelled not just of gunpowder and blood, but of burnt bread and rotting flesh. These odors mingled, a pervasive stench of decay and desperation, a sensory testament to the ultimate cost of this conflict. The grand ideologies, the promises of swift victory, the initial confidence, all of it dissolved into a primal struggle for survival. You realize that for many, particularly in those final, desperate months, the fight was no longer for victory, for nation, or for ideology. It was a far simpler, more profound battle. It was a fight for one more mouthful. This singular, desperate objective, one more bite, one more sip of warm liquid became the driving force. Eclipsing all other motivations, it stripped away the veneer of military glory and exposed the raw, vulnerable core of humanity. The image of the man biting into his own boot, the metallic taste of the leather broth, lingers in your mind. It is a powerful, haunting echo of a time when the very act of survival hinged on the most basic of needs, violently denied. And as you allow this story to settle, you are left with a quiet, profound understanding of the deep scars left by this war. Not just on the land or in the annals of history, but within the very human spirit, forever marked by the indelible taste of an emptiness that refused to be forgotten. The silence of that empty pot, you realize, still whispers its solemn lesson, carried on the timeless wind. Imagine, if you will, being transported back to the chilling autumn of 1942. You find yourself standing, or perhaps more accurately, cowering, amidst the skeletal remains of what was once Stalingrad. The very air around you is thick with the dust of pulverized stone and the acrid scent of lingering smoke. The sky above is a perpetual canvas of gray, often streaked with the fiery hues of distant explosions. Yet here, on the ground, a profound silence often reigns, broken only by the crunch of your boot on shattered glass or the unsettling, distant crack of a rifle shot. This city, once a bustling hub, has been reduced to a vast, sprawling graveyard of concrete and twisted metal. Every street is a labyrinth of obstacles, every building a hollowed-out shell, echoing with forgotten lives. The nature of warfare here has shifted dramatically, morphing into something far more insidious than the grand, sweeping maneuvers of tanks and artillery. Death no longer announces itself with the roaring engines of a panzer or the earth-shaking thunder of an artillery barrage. Instead, it arrives in utter silence, an almost imperceptible whisper on the wind, delivered by invisible eyes hidden within the mountains of debris. You learn quickly to distrust every shadow, to scrutinize every shard of broken brick. For within this landscape of desolation, Soviet and German snipers have transformed the ruins into their own brutal hunting grounds. These aren't just battlefields. They are arenas of infinite patience and creeping terror. where every second is stretched taut between life and demise. You are acutely aware that survival here is a constant, grinding calculation. Each duel, each silent confrontation between unseen marksmen could stretch on for agonizing hours. The sun might rise and set, painting the ruins in long, deceptive shadows, while two souls remain locked in an invisible embrace, their breaths held, their muscles aching with the strain of immobility. Or, just as suddenly, an encounter could conclude in the blink of an eye, with a single, devastating second of carelessness, a misplaced step, a glint of sunlight on a scope, a momentary lapse in vigilance. The psychological toll is immense. You feel the constant pressure, the gnawing anxiety that a crosshair might be fixed upon you, even as you simply try to navigate the rubble. The air hums with an unspoken dread, a pervasive knowledge that somewhere out there, a pair of eyes is waiting, watching, evaluating your every move. It is within this crucible of destruction and unseen danger that a name began to ripple through the hushed conversations across the mighty Volga River. A name whispered with a mixture of fear, reverence, and desperate hope. Vasily Zaitsev. His story, you understand, would soon blossom into legend, a beacon of defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. But as you listen closely to the faint, mournful cries of the wind winding through the broken structures, you begin to grasp that, like all legends forged in the crucible of war, the truth of his tale and the reality of life in Stalingrad was often far darker, far more gritty, and perhaps more profoundly human than any heroic ballad could fully capture. You feel the weight of this truth settling upon your shoulders, a heavy cloak against the pervasive cold of the ruined city. Now, let us gently shift our gaze from the grim devastation of Stalingrad, back in time, eastward, to a much different landscape, a place of rugged beauty and profound stillness, the Ural Mountains. Here, the air is crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, a stark contrast to the metallic tang of war. You imagine a young Vasily, born in 1915 in a small village named Yeleninka, growing up not with the clamor of cities, but with the quiet grandeur of vast forests and towering peaks. It was a childhood steeped in the rhythms of nature, far removed from the coming storm. His true schooling, you realize, came not from books or classrooms, but from the teachings of his wise and weathered grandfather, a man whose hands were calloused by hard work and whose eyes held the keen, discerning gaze of a seasoned hunter. It was this grandfather who initiated young Vasily into the ancient rites of the hunt, teaching him not just how to track and shoot, but how to truly be in the wilderness. You picture the two of them, moving like shadows through the dense taiga, the snow crunching softly underfoot, or the fallen leaves rustling almost imperceptibly as they stalked their prey. Vasily learned the paramount importance of patience, of reading the subtle language of the forest, the broken twig, the disturbed patch of moss, the faint scent on the wind. He learned to become one with his surroundings, to blend in, to wait. His weapon of choice, in those formative years, was a simple, single-shot Burden rifle. It was a firearm that demanded absolute precision, for there was no room for error, no second chances. Each bullet was precious, a testament to skill and focus. From his grandfather, he absorbed the fundamental creed, one shot, one kill. This wasn't a boast, but a philosophy born of respect for the wild, a necessity for survival, and a deep understanding of the connection between hunter and hunted. You can almost feel the weight of that rifle in your hands, the smooth, cold wood against your cheek, the profound responsibility that came with each carefully aimed shot. This intimate relationship with his weapon, this unflinching discipline, would become the bedrock of his future legend. Years drifted by, marked by the changing seasons in the Urals. In 1937, a young Vasily, now a man, answered the call of duty and joined the Soviet Navy. You see him, perhaps, standing on the deck of a ship, the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean stretching before him, stationed in Vladivostok, a bustling port city far, far from the distant rumblings of a war that would soon engulf a continent. His life, at this point, was one of routine in the boundless horizons of the sea. But the winds of fate were shifting, and the world was hurtling towards an unimaginable conflict. When the German forces launched their devastating invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, the call to defend the motherland resonated deeply within Zaitsev. Despite his naval posting, his heart, you sense, yearned for the front lines, for a more direct role in the defense of his homeland. He volunteered, without hesitation, to fight on land. The boy who once honed his skills stalking the elusive wolves and agile deer within the quiet, ancient forests of the Urals would now, with an almost poetic and brutal irony, find himself hunting men amidst the broken, chaotic ruins of a city. This profound transformation, from nature's quiet observer to urban predator, was almost complete. His innate precision, sharpened by years of quiet observation and meticulous aim, coupled with an almost supernatural patience, would soon make him the most feared marksman, a silent guardian, in the scarred and beleaguered city of Stalingrad. The stillness of the Urals, it seems, had prepared him for the most violent of storms. The summer of 1942 was a brutal, relentless season, particularly for the Soviet Union. You can almost feel the oppressive heat, smell the dry earth, and sense the mounting tension as the German army, a juggernaut of steel and men, surged eastward. Its ultimate objective, the strategic city of Stalingrad, perched on the banks of the mighty Volga River. As you contemplate this relentless advance, you visualize the city itself, a sprawling industrial heartland, now enveloped in a perpetual inferno. Stalingrad, you imagine, burned day and night, its factories, its homes, its very soul consumed by the insatiable flames of war. The sky over the city must have been a sickening mix of black smoke and the orange glow of endless fires, a grim beacon visible for miles around. It was into this fiery maw that Zaitsev's division, the 284th Rifle Division, was dispatched. You picture the grueling journey they endured, a month-long train ride across the vast, war-torn landscape of Russia. Imagine the cramped conditions, the rhythmic clang of the wheels on the tracks, the constant uncertainty, the faces of your comrades, weary and stoic, perhaps gazing out at the blur of the passing countryside, knowing what lay ahead. Each mile brought them closer to the epicenter of the conflict, closer to a destiny that would test the very limits of human endurance. The anticipation, the dread mixed with resolve, must have been an almost unbearable weight in the air, a silent companion on that long, rattling passage. Then came the crossing of the Volga. This wasn't a ferry ride or a peaceful transit. It was an act of desperate courage under the most intense artillery fire. You can almost hear the terrifying shriek of incoming shells, the geysers of water erupting from the river as explosives slammed into the surface, the frantic shouts of officers, the churning engines of the small boats, straining against the current and the relentless barrage. Soldiers, many of them young, fresh from training, or seasoned veterans hardened by previous battles, referred to it as a crossing into hell. You feel the spray of the river water on your face, taste the grit in the air, and hear the deafening roar of explosions that threaten to capsize your small vessel at any moment. Once ashore, the hell was undeniably present. The streets that greeted them were not paved roads, but trenches of rubble, choked with smoke that hung low like a shroud, obscuring vision and muffling sounds. The air was thick with the stench of death, mingling with the metallic tang of blood and the sweet, cloying smell of decaying masonry. Corpses, grim reminders of the battles that had already raged, lay scattered amidst the crumbling factories and residential buildings. Each structure, you realize, was no longer just a building. It was a fortress, a contested strongpoint, a potential sniper nest, or a hiding place for the enemy. The city itself had become a monstrous, teeth-gnashing beast, ready to consume all who entered. It was in this unforgiving crucible that Zaitsev truly earned his stripes, enduring the brutal, visceral reality of close-quarter combat. You find yourself in the thick of it, feeling the raw intensity of the fighting near Mamayev Kurgan, a strategic hill overlooking the city that would become the site of some of the most ferocious battles. Hand-to-hand engagements, desperate pushes, sudden retreats. The chaos was relentless. You feel the sting of pain twice as Zaitsev sustained wounds in these desperate skirmishes. Yet he pushed through. He survived. Though the experience, you understand, left an indelible mark, hardening his spirit, sharpening his instincts. He watched, with a quiet, steely resolve, as friends and comrades, the men he had traveled with, shared rations with, whispered hopes with, vanished one by one into the smoke and the wreckage, consumed by the voracious appetite of Stalingrad. Each loss was a chisel blow, sculpting him into the warrior he was destined to become, leaving behind the innocence of the Urals and embracing the grim realities of the city of death. Amidst the swirling chaos and incessant clamor of a particularly fierce firefight, a moment of profound clarity, a tiny, almost imperceptible shift in the tide, unfolded. You are there, perhaps crouching behind a jagged piece of concrete, the sounds of machine gun fire ripping through the air, the shouts of men, the explosions echoing all around you. In the thick of this visceral pandemonium, your attention is drawn to a specific threat, a German MG-42 machine gun team. Its rapid-fire bursts pinning down your comrades, delivering a devastating barrage that seemed insurmountable. Hope, for a moment, flickered. But then, a figure emerges, moving with an almost unnatural calm amidst the storm. You watch, captivated, as Zaitsev, with an almost surgical precision that seems to defy the very nature of the battlefield, silences the formidable MG-42 team. 3 shots, just 3, each one distinct and deliberate, cutting through the din. With each crack of his rifle, the relentless chatter of the German machine gun falters, then finally ceases altogether. The silence that follows is not total, but it is profound. A sudden vacuum in the cacophony, a brief, blessed reprieve that allows your comrades to breathe, to move, to regroup. It is a display of lethal accuracy that is both terrifying and awe-inspiring. This extraordinary act did not go unnoticed. Colonel Nikolai Batyuk, a veteran commander with a shrewd eye for talent, witnessed the almost impossible feat. He saw not just a soldier, but a marksman of unparalleled skill. A quiet force capable of turning the tide of battle with a single, well-placed round. It was an insight that would change Zaitsev's destiny and, in many ways, the very face of urban warfare in Stalingrad. Batyuk, without hesitation, issued an order Zaitsev was to become a sniper. This was a critical turning point, a recognition of a specialized skill that would prove indispensable in the unique crucible of the city. At that time, you understand, the concept of snipers held a somewhat antiquated perception within military circles. They were often viewed as relics of a bygone era, perhaps useful in the static trench warfare of the First World War, but perhaps less relevant in the fast-moving, mechanized conflicts of the modern age. Yet, Stalingrad, with its pulverized landscape and close-quarters brutality, would profoundly challenge and ultimately redefine that perception. The city itself, you realize, became a sprawling, dangerous classroom, forcing a reevaluation of tactics and strategies. The urban ruins, with their endless layers of shattered walls, collapsed ceilings, and mountainous rubble, transformed into a labyrinth of sightlines. Every broken window, every gap between fallen bricks, every shadowed corner offered a potential vantage point. A hidden alcove for a patient killer. It was a sniper's paradise. Or perhaps a sniper's hell, depending on your perspective. The environment perfectly suited Zaitsev's innate abilities, honed in the quiet forests of his youth. He quickly began to craft his own camouflaged nests, places of near-perfect concealment, blending seamlessly into the debris and wreckage. He used every available material: shards of metal, piles of bricks, discarded uniforms, the very dust of the city to disappear, to become an almost mythical shadow within the ruins. The boy who had once hunted in the quiet, green expanses of the Urals was now reborn as a hunter of a different kind. You can feel the transformation within him, the merging of his wilderness instincts with the harsh realities of the battlefield. He was no longer tracking deer or wolves. He was hunting men, navigating the treacherous landscape through broken windows and shattered walls. His rifle an extension of his will, his eye a precise instrument of war. The silence of the city, once merely a backdrop for destruction, now became his ally, a vast, echoing chamber where a single shot could profoundly alter the course of lives. And indeed, the fate of the embattled city, his legend, born in the roar of battle, would now thrive in the silent, watchful world of the sniper. As Zaitsev's reputation quietly grew amidst the dust and smoke of Stalingrad, his exceptional skills began to spark a profound shift in the mindset of the Soviet forces. You sense a new energy stirring, a growing realization that individual precision, when harnessed and multiplied, could be a potent weapon against a well-equipped and relentless enemy. Soviet troops, inspired by the effectiveness of riflemen like Alexander Kalentiev, a skilled marksman whose quiet triumphs were already making a difference, began to embrace this specialized form of combat. A sniper movement was quietly taking root, blossoming amidst the despair of the city. You imagine Zaitsev, at first, as a student himself, humbly learning the subtle nuances of urban sniping from the experienced Kalentiev. There's a natural transfer of knowledge, a shared understanding of the solitary, patient art. But Zaitsev's prowess was too remarkable to be confined to a singular role for long. Recognizing his natural leadership and his innate ability to communicate the intricacies of his craft, he was soon given a crucial, expanded mission to train others, to replicate his success, to multiply the silent threat. This was a testament to his impact, a recognition that the individual's skill could be systematically taught and applied on a wider scale. His recruits, a diverse group drawn from the ranks, eagerly absorbed his wisdom. They were given a unique and rather affectionate nickname, one that played on their instructor's own surname, the Hares. Zaitsev, in Russian, you recall, means hare, a creature known for its swiftness, its ability to blend into its environment, and its quick, decisive movements. This moniker, a touch of light-heartedness amidst the grim realities, bound them together, creating a sense of camaraderie and shared purpose. You can almost see them, young men and women, gathered around Zaitsev in a makeshift classroom amidst the rubble, their faces etched with determination, listening intently to his every word. Zaitsev's teaching transcended mere marksmanship. He taught them, fundamentally, to think, not just to shoot. He instilled in them the absolute necessity of patience, an almost Zen-like ability to remain utterly still for hours on end, to become one with their chosen hiding spot. He emphasized the art of deception, how to draw out an enemy, how to make them reveal themselves, how to create illusions that would lead to a fatal error. And, of course, precision was paramount. One shot, one kill. A philosophy he had learned in the serene wilderness, now applied to the brutal concrete jungle. Aim for the man with medals, he would tell them, his voice calm yet firm. Kill courage, and the rest will break. It was a profound insight into the psychological warfare inherent in sniping, targeting not just a body, but the very spirit of the enemy. By eliminating high-value targets, commanders, radio operators, or especially decorated soldiers, they could sow fear, disrupt command, and erode morale far more effectively than random shots. As the sniper movement gained traction, the Soviet press, ever vigilant for stories to galvanize a weary populace, seized upon their kills. Their successes were glorified, transformed into tales of heroism and defiance. These narratives, you understand, were more than just news. They were a vital lifeline, a much-needed boost to morale amidst the pervasive despair that gripped Stalingrad and the entire Soviet Union, in a war that often seemed to be bleeding them dry. These quiet victories, achieved by individual bravery and skill, offered a powerful counter-narrative, a flicker of hope that even in the face of overwhelming destruction, individual courage could still make a decisive difference. The legend of the sniper, born in the quiet resolve of one man, was now spreading like wildfire, igniting a new kind of resistance. As autumn deepened into late October of 1942, the air in Stalingrad grew colder, carrying with it not just the chill of winter, but a new, more sinister kind of dread. The relentless rhythm of artillery fire and small arms exchanges continued. Yet an underlying tension began to build, a subtle shift in the psychological battle that everyone could feel. It was during this period that a captured German soldier, interrogated amidst the rubble, revealed a piece of news that sent a shiver down the spines of the Soviet command, and particularly through the quiet confidence of Vasily Zaitsev. The Wehrmacht, he disclosed, had grown increasingly frustrated by the effectiveness of the Soviet snipers, particularly the elusive Russian Hare, whose kill count continued to mount, sowing fear and disrupting their operations. In response, they had dispatched their very best, a specialist of unparalleled reputation, Major Erwin Koenig. This wasn't just another sniper. Koenig was described as the head of Berlin's sniper school, a master of his craft, legendary in his own right. His mission, stark and unequivocal, was singular: to hunt down and eliminate the Russian hare. You feel the weight of this information, the sudden, sharp realization that the hunter was now being hunted by an equal, perhaps even superior, adversary. Upon hearing this revelation from Colonel Batyuk, Zaitsev, in front of his commander and comrades, managed a dry laugh, a facade of nonchalance. You can almost hear the forced humor in his voice, a brave attempt to project strength and dismiss the threat. But inside, you sense a profound realization settled upon him, a heavy weight that felt like the inexorable hand of fate. He understood the gravity of the situation. This was no longer just about accumulating kills. This was a personal challenge, a duel of wits and skill that would determine not only his own survival, but would also serve as a potent symbol for the morale of both armies. The Russian hare had attracted the attention of the Berlin Ghost. Every day, Zaitsev continued his relentless work, adding to his already impressive tally, quietly dispatching 4 or 5 enemy soldiers, sometimes more. But with each successful shot, you perceive a growing sense of unease, a gnawing intuition that his luck, like a thin thread, was being stretched ever closer to its breaking point. The unseen presence of Koenig, the master hunter, was a palpable entity, a silent shadow that lengthened with each passing hour. The stakes had been raised exponentially. This was no longer just about outwitting ordinary soldiers. This was about outthinking a true professional, a man whose skills were legendary within his own ranks. The stage for this monumental duel was, fittingly, set near a small spring at Mamayev Kurgan, that strategic hill that had already witnessed so much bloodshed. This unassuming patch of ground, where soldiers would often risk their lives for a sip of precious water, was about to become the epicenter of a deadly, drawn-out confrontation. You can almost feel the ground beneath your feet, already soaked in the blood of countless fallen men, now preparing to receive the silent, meticulous steps of 2 masters, each seeking to end the other's life. The gentle gurgle of the spring, usually a sound of life and sustenance, would soon be accompanied by the chilling silence of an invisible war, where every breath, every movement, every flicker of light held the potential for triumph or ultimate demise. The duel, a silent ballet of death, had truly begun. The first day of the duel dawned, not with a bang, but with a chilling premonition. You feel the heavy weight of the morning air, thick with anticipation and dread. Zaitsev had positioned 2 of his most promising snipers, men he had trained himself in what he believed to be safe, strategic locations. But Koenig, the Berlin Ghost, proved to be as cunning as he was deadly. Within hours, the unseen German master launched a swift, devastating ambush. You hear the sharp crack of a distant rifle, followed by a muffled cry. One of Zaitsev's snipers was wounded, a stark, painful lesson in the adversary's skill. Another, narrowly escaping death, was left shaken, their belief in their own invulnerability shattered. The immediate implication was clear: Koenig was already at work, testing the defenses, probing for weaknesses, and demonstrating his lethal efficiency. He had announced his presence in the most brutal way possible. Zaitsev, his face etched with grim determination, knew he could not allow this silent killer to operate unchecked. Accompanied by his best pupil, Kulikov, a young man who had absorbed his teachings with remarkable aptitude. They began their painstaking crawl. You feel the cold, hard earth against your body, the sharp edges of rubble digging into your skin, as you move inch by agonizing inch through the treacherous terrain. Every broken brick, every shard of glass, every discarded piece of metal had to be navigated with excruciating caution. Their movements were agonizingly slow, deliberate, each calculated to avoid detection, each breath held in silent tension. They sought a vantage point, a hidden crevice from which they could observe the battlefield, searching for any telltale sign of their elusive enemy. Hours bled into an eternity. You feel the sun arc across the sky, its meager warmth doing little to dispel the chill of apprehension. The only sounds that punctuating the suffocating silence were the persistent buzz of flies, an unsettling reminder of the pervasive death around them, and the distant, almost abstract rumble of artillery or the sporadic crackle of gunfire from other parts of the city. But where Koenig lay hidden, there was an unnatural stillness, an almost perfect absence of activity that was more terrifying than any open assault. The waiting was a torment, a grinding test of nerve and endurance. You feel the ache in your muscles, the strain in your eyes, as you scan every shadow, every subtle shift in the landscape, searching for the slightest hint of movement, a glint of metal, a disturbed piece of debris. Suddenly, a subtle movement breaks the monotony. A helmet, unmistakably German, bobs up from what appears to be a section of the enemy trench line. It hangs there for a moment, a perfect target, almost inviting a shot. But Zaitsev, with his ingrained discipline and acute tactical sense, recognizes it instantly for what it is: a decoy, a test, a lure. He and Kulikov exchange a silent glance, a shared understanding passing between them. They do not shoot. To have done so would have revealed their position, turning the tables in Koenig's favor. The patience they had cultivated, the discipline to resist the obvious, proved to be their silent shield. Day 2 offered no change. The silent standoff continued, deepening into a profound psychological warfare. You experience the agonizing frustration of staring into an abyss, of being hunted by an unseen predator who seems to possess an almost supernatural ability to remain hidden. The duel had become a brutal test of wills, a battle of patience versus instinct, calculation versus impulse. Every passing minute added to the mental strain. Zaitsev, however, used this time not just for passive waiting, but for meticulous observation. You see him, perhaps, pulling out a small, grimy notebook and a stub of a pencil, sketching the fractured landscape before him with painstaking detail. He memorized every crater, every broken brick, every shifting shadow, every twisted piece of metal. He was building a mental map of their adversary's potential hunting grounds, piecing together the puzzle of Koenig's movements and habits, searching for the almost imperceptible flaws in his opponent's masterful concealment. The city, in its destruction, held clues, and Zaitsev was determined to find them. The stillness of the day was filled with the silent, unseen struggle of two minds, each seeking to outwit the other, each breath a testament to enduring resolve. The relentless tension stretched into a third day, an almost unbearable weight pressing down upon you. In a desperate attempt to break the agonizing stalemate, Commissar Danilov, a brave but perhaps less experienced officer, decided to take action. He moved to investigate a suspicious area, believing he might have spotted a clue or a potential hiding place for the elusive German sniper. You witness his fatal error in judgment, the sudden, terrible swiftness of it. Before he could even register the danger, a single, devastating shot rang out. Danilov crumpled to the ground, instantly struck down by the hidden marksman. The silence that followed was even more profound, a chilling testament to Koenig's continued presence and his deadly precision. The loss of a comrade, particularly one who had tried to help, fueled Zaitsev's grim resolve. The immediate impact of Danilov's death, while tragic, provided Zaitsev with a crucial, albeit costly, piece of information. You see his mind working, sharp and analytical, even in the face of grief. He meticulously studied the impact angle of the bullet, the exact spot where Danilov had fallen, and the surrounding terrain. He began to triangulate, narrowing down the possible locations of the unseen killer. It was a macabre detective work, using death itself as a data point. His eyes, now sharper than ever, scanned every inch of the ruined landscape, searching, truly searching, for an anomaly, a subtle discrepancy in the pattern of destruction that Koenig might have overlooked. Then, his gaze settled on something that had previously seemed utterly mundane, a discarded sheet of metal. Perhaps a piece of corrugated roofing, partially propped up, next to a small pile of bricks. It was too ordinary, too still, too perfectly blended into the chaos. Its very innocuousness made it suspicious. He realized that this seemingly natural arrangement of debris was, in fact, the cunningly crafted nest of the Berlin ghost. It was a masterpiece of camouflage, designed to be overlooked, a place where Koenig could lie in wait, observing the world through a tiny, imperceptible gap. With the puzzle pieces finally falling into place, Zaitsev began to meticulously construct his own counter-trap. You observe him, moving with the quiet, deliberate grace of a seasoned hunter, gathering materials from the surrounding rubble. He fashioned a decoy, using a glove and a piece of wood to simulate a human hand, perhaps even dangling a small shard of mirror to catch the light, mimicking the glint of a rifle scope. Carefully, painstakingly, he raised the decoy, just barely, above their own concealed position. Bang! The sound rips through the air, sharp and conclusive. A bullet slams into the decoy, precisely where Zaitsev had anticipated it would. The metal splintered, the wood shattered, the illusion destroyed. But in that instant, a crucial piece of the enemy's concealment was compromised. Koenig had fired, and in doing so, had betrayed his exact location. His line of fire now revealed. The trap was sprung. Zaitsev knew, with an almost chilling certainty, precisely where the Berlin ghost was hiding. The long, agonizing wait had culminated in this decisive moment of revelation. The tension, though briefly alleviated by the successful trick, immediately shifted to a different kind of intensity. The stage was set for the final act. As dawn approached on November 5th, the soft, pale light of the rising sun began to cast long shadows across the ruined cityscape. Zaitsev, ever the master of his environment, noted that the light now favored his side, illuminating Koenig's position just enough, while keeping his own in shadow. The advantage, after days of agonizing stalemate, had finally swung in his favor. You feel the slow, deliberate rhythm of his breathing, the profound calm that settles over him in these critical moments. It was time for the final shot, the culmination of days of silent warfare. The moment when one legend would solidify, and another would, inevitably, fall. As the first weak rays of the November 5th sun began to pierce the perpetual gloom of Stalingrad, casting long, deceptive shadows across the desolate landscape, the final decisive act of the sniper duel was set to unfold. You feel the profound quietude of the morning, broken only by the distant, muted sounds of a city still locked in struggle. Zaitsev and Kulikov, their positions meticulously chosen, lay utterly still, their hearts beating a slow, steady rhythm against the cold, hard earth. The moment of truth had arrived. With a silent nod from Zaitsev, Kulikov began his part in the deadly charade. Slowly, with agonizing deliberation, he raised his helmet just a fraction of an inch above the protective cover of their concealed nest. It was a familiar trick, one that had been used countless times. Yet in this high-stakes game, its execution had to be flawless. For a breathless moment, the helmet remained poised, a seemingly vulnerable target. Then, with a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor, Kulikov allowed it to drop slightly, mimicking the recoil and slump of a soldier who had just taken a fatal hit. He faked being struck, creating the illusion of a successful kill. The German sniper, Major Koenig, seeing the familiar bait, and perhaps confident after his previous successes and the long, arduous wait, must have believed he had finally triumphed. You imagine the flicker of satisfaction, the momentary lapse in his iron discipline. He had waited for days, patiently stalking his elusive prey, and now, it seemed, he had won. In that split second of presumed victory, driven by the need to confirm his kill, or perhaps just to readjust his aim for the next target, Koenig made his fatal error. He peeked, just for a moment, just enough to expose a sliver of his head, a minuscule target in the vastness of the ruins. In that same instant, Zaitsev, his senses honed to an almost preternatural degree, fired. There was no hesitation, no wasted motion, no second thought. One shot. The crack of the rifle cut through the morning air, sharp and conclusive. Then, an immediate, profound silence descended upon their sector. No answering shot, no sound of movement from Koenig's nest. Only the echo, fading quickly into the vast emptiness of the ruined city. You feel the lingering reverberation of the shot, a tremor through the earth, a vibration in the air. That night, under the cloak of darkness, Zaitsev and Kulikov undertook the perilous journey across the contested ground. You feel the chilling cold of the night air, the pervasive scent of damp earth and decay as they crawled towards the suspected location of Koenig's nest, the very spot marked by the sheet of metal and the pile of bricks. The tension, even after the shot, remained almost unbearable. They had to be certain. Reaching the makeshift hideout, they discovered the truth. His enemy lay dead. A single, precise bullet hole in his forehead, a testament to Zaitsev's unwavering aim. In the faint light of a tactical flashlight, they found the documents. The identification confirmed their suspicions. It was indeed Major Erwin Koenig, the Berlin sniper master, the expert sent specifically to eliminate Zaitsev. The confrontation had concluded. The ghost had been vanquished. In that moment, Zaitsev's legend was not just born, it solidified, taking on a life of its own. The news of his triumph spread like wildfire across the Soviet media. a powerful narrative delivered to a weary nation. It was a story of defiance, skill, and ultimate victory against a seemingly insurmountable foe. A beacon of hope flickering brightly amidst the darkness of Stalingrad. The quiet hunter from the Urals had met his match and emerged triumphant, forever cementing his place in the annals of war. As the dust of battle slowly settled, and the grim clarity of hindsight began to illuminate the stories woven in the crucible of war, the legend of Zaitsev versus Koenig continued to endure. Yet, like many narratives born from the fog of conflict, the lines between heroic truth and vital propaganda began to subtly blur. You feel the gentle pull of history, inviting you to look a little closer, to understand the nuanced layers beneath the powerful myth. Later, as researchers meticulously combed through the vast archives of the Wehrmacht, a curious absence became apparent. No official record of a Major Erwin Koenig holding the esteemed position of head of Berlin's sniper school could be found. This revelation, you understand, casts a fascinating shadow over the definitive truth of the duel. It suggests that Koenig, the formidable Berlin ghost, was quite likely a masterful propaganda invention. He could have been created by Soviet command, perhaps even specifically crafted by Colonel Batyuk to provide a compelling, personal antagonist for their own rising star, Zaitsev. In the brutal psychological warfare of Stalingrad, the narrative itself became a weapon, a means to inspire courage and determination. However, the absence of Koenig does not diminish the reality of the duel itself, nor the immense skill and courage of Zaitsev. It simply shifts our understanding of his opponent, the true adversary, the unseen German sniper whom Zaitsev undoubtedly faced and ultimately defeated. May have been Gefreiter Hermann Stoff, a highly skilled German marksman credited with 103 confirmed kills. Stoff was indeed active in Stalingrad during that period, posing a significant threat to Soviet forces. While his name lacks the dramatic flair of Major Erwin Koenig, his presence and prowess were very real, making Zaitsev's victory no less significant. Regardless of the precise identity of Zaitsev's adversary, the symbolic power of the duel remains undiminished. It perfectly encapsulates the brutal mind games, the intense psychological warfare, and the deadly dance of patience and precision that characterized the sniper battles within Stalingrad's ruins. You can still feel the tension, the silent struggle of wills, the high stakes of every decision. It was a microcosm of the larger war, fought on an intensely personal level, where individual skill and mental fortitude could mean the difference between life and death, victory and defeat. Zaitsev himself continued to serve with distinction, becoming a symbol of Soviet resistance and exceptional marksmanship. He ended the war with an astonishing 235 confirmed kills, a testament to his unwavering skill and dedication. His extraordinary service was recognized with the highest honor, the Hero of the Soviet Union, cementing his place in the pantheon of wartime heroes. Even after the war, his legacy continued through his work as a military instructor, passing on his invaluable knowledge and experience to future generations of marksmen. His words, imbued with the deep, unyielding spirit of defiance that characterized Stalingrad, continue to resonate. For us, there is no land beyond the Volga. This declaration, you sense, was more than just a military slogan. It was a profound testament to the resolve of the Soviet people, a fierce commitment to defend their homeland to the very last breath, to fight for every inch of sacred ground. It speaks to a raw, primal determination that transcended tactics and strategy, rooted in the very soul of a nation under siege. In the shattered ruins of Stalingrad, a city that became a byword for human endurance and immense suffering, legend and truth became intertwined, almost indistinguishable. Both, you understand, were undeniably soaked in blood, forged in the fires of conflict, and forever etched into the collective memory of history. As you reflect on this tale, let the echoes of Zaitsev's quiet determination and the profound bravery of those who fought in that devastating city guide you gently into a restful night. A peaceful contemplation of the enduring power of human spirit amidst the greatest of trials. And perhaps, as you drift to sleep, you can still hear, faintly, the whispers of the wind sweeping across those distant, battle-scarred plains, carrying the stories of old.